Women in AI is a non-profit global do tank on a mission to increase female representation and participation in the field of artificial intelligence.
In the Netherlands, we exist since 2018, and during the past year and a half, we've been focusing on understanding how to bridge the gender gap in the Netherlands. So as of now, we are focusing on the program called Accelerate. That is a program meant for women entrepreneurs in the field of artificial intelligence, data science, and machine learning. We have some of them on the webinar, most of them actually, because they're key learners. And I have a message to share with our community right away. Many of them are searching for CTOs or developers. So if you know of anyone or you're yourself very interested to join their fantastic AI startups, just email to eve@womeninai.co, same as domain name plus eve in the beginning, and share your passion. I will link you with those fantastic women. At the same time, I have another call to make. Women in AI is growing. We have a lot of wonderful projects like webinars as this one, or fantastic events that we plan for the future. So if you want to become part of the core team of the volunteering movement, also let me know. Same email, eve@womeninai.co. Starting this session, it is my absolute pleasure to say thank you, first of all, to Oracle for Startups. Without their help, we would not be able to move forward and organize such a boiling hot chatbotsy event. And at the same time, I would like to say a big thank you to our speakers who show their interest to share their knowledge and their expertise, and at the same time, dedicate time to present fantastic use cases that are known to this world. If I may start with introductions, I would like to pass this digital microphone and call on to stage our speakers. And the question is, could you please introduce yourself and share some facts about your passion? How did you manage to end up in such a wonderful field of virtual assistants and chatbots? Thank you so much. Let us start maybe with Marian.
About 4 or 5 years ago, I worked for ING, and someone asked me to join a pitch project, internal startup booster project, and said, I need a co-host for a project. It's a virtual assistant. I'm like, oh, great, I'll join you. By the way, what's a virtual assistant? That was my start of getting into chatbots, and it hasn't left me since, but more about that later.
All right, thank you so much. Marcel, what's your story and passion for chatbots?
I'm glad to attend today as a CEO of Fitsurance, which is a health startup. I'm fascinated by chatbots for some time. In the beginning, it was like playing around, but ever since Corona, and ever since I've been in touch with Marian and Maaike, my perspective is rapidly changing, also because of the need to distribute Corona-related information to the masses in a way better and more accelerated way. So I'm convinced now that this is maybe the prime time for chatbots. So this webinar makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure having you here, Marcel. Maaike, you're on mute. Don't forget to unmute yourself and share, please, your story, your amazing story.
Thank you, Eve. Well, I'm Maaike from Convocat. I'm an independent conversational consultant. I've been doing that for 3 months, but my story goes back a bit longer. I trained as a linguist 20 years ago. I worked as a technical writer, so in content for 20 years. And 2 years ago, I just ran into chatbots in Chatbot Conference, and I was just hooked because it brings everything together that I love. I love structure, I love analysis, I love chatting, obviously, I love voice. So yeah, this is basically my dream job.
All right. Well, I love the passion. I love hearing this energy through the digital screen. That just reaches me in my heart and my brain. Right, Francesco, you here, and let me know what's your story, and I'll of course attend this. Share yours.
So first of all, thanks for having me and Bot Supply. I represent Bot Supply as founder and CEO of the company. We launched the company back in 2016 here in Copenhagen, Denmark, with the idea of helping enterprises get in what we call the conversational era. And And talking about Oracle for Startups, we have been part of the program since May 2018. And maybe later on during the webinar, I will share a bit more of the collaboration and how Oracle is helping us growing in the chatbot space globally.
Okay, I'm looking forward to your story in detail. Thank you, Francesco. So let us start with the content then. I would like to ask a question to Marcel, who is very knowledgeable in terms of digital transformation. He is a serial entrepreneur in the field of sports, health tech, and fintech. And my question to you, Marcel, would be, COVID, which is a pandemic, but it's also a force to implementing different digital tools. Businesses accelerating from chatbots to other platforms. But in your opinion, what are the key things that you see appearing in the market due to this pandemic movement and acceleration?
Yeah, so that's slide number 1 with 4 sub-slides, starting on the left corner on the top. The one trend on the first place is the dashboarding, which is now moving to a global stage. The mapping, I've read an interesting article on the Financial Times this morning. I will share it after this webinar, by the way, but they mentioned John Hopkins having 1 billion hits a day. 1 billion users a day are checking this website. This is totally new. That has never happened. That means people want to know about facts above their country, above the politics, that they can trust and interpret themselves. I think that's a really interesting trend. Moving to the next one, to the right on the top, that's collaborative data science and research. It's clear that many people that do policy or politics or lead companies, they don't have the facts in hand to make educated decisions. The joke is 100% of the corona-related decisions are based on less than 100% of the data available. Many people are using their gut feeling, which is not wrong, but you can always question if these decisions are, the right ones. That's also the reason why several countries take different approaches, because data is missing. Key point here, if scientists across the globe work together, also with the citizens like you and me, that have, on-the-spot wisdom or observations, then things could really improve, where we have accurate and timely statistics. Going to the bottom on the left, accelerated vaccine R&D, we found out, painfully as it is, that we're really slow in engineering and deploying vaccine worldwide. This is now geopolitically sensitive. Bill Gates is working hard to make sure we double our efforts. We become twice as fast for this vaccine, but also the future ones that I'm told will be coming soon. I think this is really interesting. This will free up a lot of money to help people like you and me, us in this call, to do our job. Next one, to the right on the bottom, the digital divide. We're, not in the danger zone age-wise, but the people down there, you can see they're above 70, overweight maybe, still they're isolated. They don't know how to use tooling, but that's the only thing they maybe have. They cannot see their family anymore, their friends. They're totally isolated. They're deprived of means to communicate. We all agree, I think now, something has to be done to help these people. Employee well-being. This is also from the Financial Times. The burnout risk is about 50%. People that are in the corporate life, I'm a veteran, 1 out of 2 is suffering from burnout risk. And you can guess, Corona is worsening things. People are working too hard at home, cannot break free, and something has to be done. Companies like ING is now surveying their employee workforce every 2 days, asking them, how are you? How do you feel? How's your energy? That's really interesting. Much can be learned from that. Next one, health security. This is coming to us really soon. We want to return to the workplace, reboot the economy. We have to test at the entrance. We need to divide or separate, or differentiate the people at risk, in many ways, of course, from the people that are not at risk at that day, which can be different the next day. This will come soon, because again, we need to reboot companies. Otherwise, we have bigger problems than just a few people dying until now. Luckily, knock on wood, we need to protect companies' income and families to make sure they will survive economically and then also health-wise. Next one, bottom to the left, virtual personal coaching. As we all know, people in self-isolation suffer from physical issues. They become overweighted, obese maybe in some cases, which is of course a risk factor by itself, but also mental issues are there. Typically, you would go to your best friend, have a party, or go to your therapist or coach, but you cannot meet them right now. Virtual coaching is not perfect, but it seems to trigger benefits, especially when you introduce measurements and feedback based on the data that comes out of the measurement. That's interesting. Also, the chatbot could be interesting here, replacing the real guy or girl you like with something that's proximate, a compromise. This is Fitsurance. It's the logo there, so this is what we're doing. Finally, digital transformation. People working at home. In some countries, that was taboo. In some cities, even in the Netherlands, that's taboo. That has all changed. It's easier than many people thought. That means the leadership, the way people are, being managed as a team, is putting a lot of challenge on the employees, but especially on the CEO and all the layers directly below it. I hear that many people that give leadership are overloaded and don't function anymore because they really have to do something now and inspire people, lead them, inspire them every day. Maybe you have your own personal observation, but for many managers I know, that's not in their book. That's not what they've been paid for until now. This is the most interesting transformation, I think. That's my part.
Wow, that's fantastic overview, Marcel.
Thank you.
I'm very observant, though I'm in social isolation, staying at home, but being on the laptop, I see all these tools appearing, and from health maps, heat maps, as I call them, to all the chatbots that actually simplify the way of indeed socializing and asking those burning questions, whether you're an entrepreneur or a person who is in a situation that you need to check something, or even trying to figure out, is it just a normal flu that you're experiencing at the moment, or it's not normal at all and it's corona? What are the symptoms? Talk to the chatbot and use the digital platforms. There are various tools. I would say, out of all of this that you mentioned, what is the one that you are the most inspired by or fascinated about? The use of it, the power of that tool?
I think it's employee well-being. Many people already were working a lot of time, a lot of hours behind the screen. I think we now have the proof, or at least the smoking gun, that's not the way forward. We're more social animals, group animals than we thought we were. Even though we're now AI-driven, data-driven, that doesn't change. We're still biological systems. For me, that's the number one.
And that's what Fitsurance is doing, right? I see the logo.
Yes. The employee well-being also relates to the skin hunger principle. That means the need of all of us to touch and embrace and kiss.
Okay, that's a
very
good
powerful,
statement.
I think.
I think I'm going to be quoting that. Embrace and touch and
Feel free.
do whatever needed.
Feel free.
Okay, fantastic. Well, if anyone on the call interested to explore more about the tools, Marcel will be sharing the deck later on. And you can also Google Fitsurance, because I mentioned it. Okay, speaking of particular digital tools and virtual assistants, as they come very handy nowadays, Maaike Groenewege, I would like to really dive deeper into the topic of virtual assistants and conversation design chatbots. So if we could start with a little bit of what Convocat is, because that's the company you represent nowadays, and what did you do before Convocat?
Let's start with the last one. What I did before Convocat, because that's way longer that I'm with Convocat now. I started out as a technical writer, so I wrote user instructions and procedures for all kinds of audiences. Most of them were, well, I spent about 14 years with Dutch air traffic control. So the user instructions there tend to be quite crucial, like emergency procedures and stuff like that. So what's needed to make sure that your users can actually successfully complete a task, that's always been fascinating to me. And basically chatbots are just a manual 4.0, I think. They give you the exact answer that you're looking for.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So after that, I moved on to other companies, and I think that in the light of chatbots and voice, that my spell with Dutch Railways is quite interesting, because I actually built or contributed to the first version of their chatbot, which is now in production as well. And currently, I actually work with Marian.
Wow. Okay, yeah. So there is a club going on.
Absolutely.
And I know that you are the founder of Women in Voice Netherlands. Is it correct?
Indeed, yes. And we are early birds in that respect, because there's not that many companies working with voice yet in the Netherlands, because Dutch is quite interesting in that respect. Mm-hmm. But we thought, well, let's be prepared. And when voice hits the market like it should, then at least we've got a bunch of experts here that do great stuff with voice as well. And we've got a big bunch now. We've got 200 women.
You're growing fast.
Absolutely.
And the organization is global, right?
It is, yes. We are only one of the chapters, and we've got chapters in America now, Japan, Mexico, lots of European countries as well. So it's definitely thriving, and we've definitely hit on something.
Wow. Okay, that's impressive. It's another topic. I'm looking forward to your own webinars that I can jump on and listen from your community. Now, let's get back to the conversation design in particular.
Sure.
Because now we can trust you. So you've been in the game for quite some time. What are the principles of a very efficient and properly working chatbot? So there is this kind of a universe of conversation flows and designs. But how do you build it in the way that it's super top-notch and very user-friendly?
Yeah, because, well, as I'm a conversation designer, so I tend to design chatbots. So I guess that my main point is actually that a great conversational experience or a great chatbot experience doesn't just happen. It's something you have to design for. And I'm also quite sure that you as AI experts, I don't have to convince you of the fact that AI or technology on its own isn't the silver bullet that people believe it to be. I spend quite a lot of time explaining to people that yes, AI is helpful, but you still have to, you know, it doesn't automatically appear, the chatbot. It doesn't come from nowhere. You still have to build it. You have to, you know, put content in it and make sure that it works. So in this phase of chatbot development where we are now globally, there's still a lot of human work needed for that. And we don't have a lot of time, so I'll just touch on 3 of the points that I find essential for a good chatbot experience. And the first one, it's possibly stating the obvious, but a good chatbot should be helpful. You don't come to a chatbot to get a great piece of literature or some other form of recreation. You go to a chatbot when you've got a problem that needs to be solved or a question that needs to be answered. And in order to be able to do that efficiently, you actually, as a designer, need a lot of domain knowledge. You need to know, okay, what is the context of my user? When do they use the chatbot? And what is it exactly what they're doing? And it's funny because most organizations tend to approach a chatbot as a technical project, but I do find that most of the times it's about organization and about content, about how do you structure your processes in such a way that they're efficient. Because if you don't, they're actually pretty hard to put in a chatbot. So yeah, chatbots that actually answer your question, obvious, but not as obvious, because I see a lot of them that still don't. Second point, for me, a chatbot ideally is conversational. And I don't know about you, but if you interact with a chatbot, even though you're typing, I'm quite sure that you don't see it as writing to a chatbot. It's not like you're emailing a chatbot saying, hi chatbot, could you please provide me some information? No, you're actually talking to it, just like you would talk to a human being. And human natural conversation actually has a lot of rules and principles and patterns that are really natural to us. Like, for instance, Eve, if I'd be talking to you, we'd be having a silent understanding, a silent agreement that we both are going to do our best to understand each other. And that is something that we people just do. It's innate. It's what's the miracle of language and communication. That's a gift for humanity. And of course, it would be really nice if your chatbot kind of does the same. Because when I talk to you and I go like, I ask you, and all of a sudden I fall silent, that's weird. You think, did I say something wrong, or is something the matter?
Oh, you forgot to mute yourself?
Sorry?
Oh, you've accidentally muted yourself.
well, there you go. You kind of make a conclusion about, hey, something is happening here. And just by, playing with this shows how natural it is for us to talk to each other and understand each other. So for a good chatbot, it would be great if they actually follow the same patterns and principles that we as humans also follow in our conversation. It's about turn taking, about how you manage your conversation, about stuff like that. Third, nimbleness. There's a lot of chatbots that actually force you to follow a certain flow or a certain path along the information. And in some cases, that's fine. I'll show you some examples later on. But the best chatbot experiences that I had are actually where I can just talk, and no matter what I say, I will get a meaningful answer. So I can just navigate freely around the chatbot, and it will just keep up with me. It will follow my pace, and it won't give up on me. And that's just a wonderful experience to have. And that's also something you can design for. So helpfulness, conversational, and nimbleness, that's what I like in a chatbot. And just a short resume. Do I have some time? Yeah, I hope. This kind of boils down to 3 design principles that I tend to use myself. For helpful chatbots, I always go for user-centered, but especially a task-oriented design. So if you look at FAQs on websites, they're usually more like descriptive. They tell you a lot about what, but not about how. Whereas when you go to a chatbot, you really want to focus on the how. How do I solve this? How do I do this? Again, design for speech rather than text. So design around user turns, about making sure that you understand each other and giving possibilities to recover, to fall back when it doesn't work in one time. And the last one, the nimbleness, that's actually where the AI comes in. Because in order to navigate freely around your bot, you need a lot of natural language processing and understanding. And in order for that to work, you actually need a lot of structure. So granular architecture, making sure you have these little building blocks in content that you can combine so that you can just navigate. That's basically what makes a good chatbot. Is it a difficult job? Sometimes. Is it a great job? Well, I love it.
That's a good follow-up to the principles of conversation design. And you said it could be hard. So on average, how long does it take to build, quite basic but functional chatbot?
Well, that's an interesting question. Actually, after the press conference that we had the day before yesterday, I built a little chatbot prototype that basically just reflects the press conference, just everything that was in there. And it took me 2 hours. And that was because the content was really good. And also there was no organization that I had to go to get all my approvals. So technically, if the content is structured in a good way, you can do it really fast. If you're building bigger bots, of course, then it can take months or even years because it's a continuous improvement and maintenance project.
Okay. So then if we had to talk about actual use cases of chatbots, maybe you could give us some examples and also specify how long it took to build, or on average, if you don't have the estimate exact one.
Well, it's interesting because, again, it's a matter of the organization and the context that you're working in, plus the available technology. If you go for like a flow-based, so a very kind of structured bot with clear roles and responsibilities, the initial creation can be done in weeks. But the thing is, a chatbot is never finished. once it's there, that's where the actual fun begins, because then people start talking with it. And then you get the actual questions, which I find is amazing. For me, it's like the golden egg. You finally know what your users really want to know. So each day you go to your chatbot, you check what's been asked and whether there's a response in your chatbot already. And day by day by day, you can actually grow your chatbot model and make it more useful, more expanded, and more complete.
Okay. All right, well, let's get then to your stories of your practical application of chatbots and SML, whether healthcare. Could you please share with us some examples?
Sure.
I'm very curious.
It's I actually, because there's quite a lot of use cases, but they all boil, or actually a lot of examples, but they boil down to the same use cases. So the one I definitely want to share with you is, for me, it's like the example. It's like the mother of all COVID-19 chatbots. It's what the World Health Organization did. For me, they have been instrumental in laying out the basis for what turned out to become like every other COVID chatbot, because they were there really early, obviously, because they're the World Health Organization. So as early as half of February, they already developed the Health Alert platform, which contained a set of about, well, 50 standard FAQs about COVID-19. So really basic questions like, okay, what is COVID and what can I do about it? Myths and misinformation about COVID and how to check on that. And this set of FAQs, I think it's been used by possibly any and every chatbot that is about COVID-19. So they really set the standard for what the content set for a COVID chatbot could be like. And then on March 20th, they actually released a WhatsApp chatbot. They reached 12 million users with that within, I don't know, a few months. And a few days ago, they even they went one step further and they released a messenger version that has the potential of reaching billions, because messenger usage has really kind of exploded with about 50%, I think. And considering that there are still entire continents that still have to have the entire COVID wave, this is of course amazing, because WHO is about reliability, about having the facts, about having up-to-date information. So that's perfect. But if you look at the chatbot itself, then you might actually be a bit surprised to see that it has numbers and it has a menu. And when you ask what is Corona, it actually says, sorry, you can't answer that. So there's no AI involved. And that's something that lots of people actually criticize, like, we have so much technology available, why don't you use it? But actually that's been a really conscious choice, because, well, the audience of the World Health Organization is basically the entire world. So that means that even if you are low literate, or if you don't have a broadband connection, you should still be able to use this information. So they designed for the lowest level of usability so everybody can use it. And particularly successful use cases of the bot has been South Africa and India and Indonesia. And that's because there the government was heavily involved with maintaining the chatbot, with keeping it up to date, making sure that people knew about it, and also making sure that it was adapted to the local situation. So this for me is the perfect use case. And I think they deserve a big round of applause. Do I have time for another one?
All right, I'm muted for the big round of applause.
Yeah, they're instrumental in spreading the news, and totally also about what Marcel said. You need to be able to reach large amounts of people, and they did it.
Do they have the limitations of GDPR that we have here, or are they just?
No, because it's menu based.
Yeah.
No problem there at all, and it's WhatsApp, so it's end-to-end encrypted. So the big parties cannot, alter anything, and you don't enter any personal information. So perfect.
All right, but you see the mobile numbers, no, from the WhatsApp users?
Actually, I'm not quite sure about that.
I don't want to sound as a nerd.
I have to check up on that.
I don't want to be too nerdy, but sometimes it's, you see the numbers of different people in the group and you're like, GDPR.
There's no group, no. You just call the WHO, right? So.
Oh yeah. Okay, well, this is a mind-blowing case. And you said you have some more. Please do share. We have enough time. Okay. At least I will make it. I will extend the time frame for you to share?
Perfect. Well, the other one that I brought with me is actually the CDC, and they, at the Center of Disease Control in the United States. And what they actually did is they took the most popular use case, I think, in COVID times, and that is the COVID self-test. Little detail, actually, Women in Voice created a flow for this as early as March 14th. But unfortunately, ours wasn't validated by the RIVM, so our public institution. So we, hospitals back then were still a bit hesitant to use it. So I guess we were just too early. But basically what this is about is it's a self-test. So what the bot will do is actually guide you through a number of questions about some personal information, about where you are, if you're living in one house with people who might be sick, if you have any kind of deadly symptoms. That's literally the question that's been asked. It's a bit of a scary question. And kind of, you know, depending on what kind of information you enter, you get an advice of the type of medical assistance that you might need. And this ranges from, okay, stay at home and isolate, or make sure that you don't meet other people, all the way to call 911 right now because it looks like you might be seriously ill. And again, because there's a public institution behind this flow has got major traction. Are you still there, Eve? Yeah, I can see you. The thing is that of course, CDC has a credibility factor. When the CDC issues information, you know it's reliable, you know it's always maintained. So people actually trust this bot enough in order to enter their own information. There's no personal information there. Again, it's just button-based. And that's interesting as well. Again, not much AI happening in the front end. And I guess that in a way, that's also a conscious choice, because obviously you don't want to be dependent on perhaps imperfectly trained NLP models that might inadvertently give you the wrong advice when you have a slight cough and you have to go to hospital straight away. Well, and it does happen because there's actually other flows that are based on this one. And there's one person who tested 8 different chatbots with this flow and he got 8 different advices. So, I mean, the use case is wonderful, but we have to make sure that the information is reliable. And we have to make sure that we are actually being ethical about this. Because if you look at the flow, again, you can, you know, this is one of the steps. You can enter some symptoms. Well, I thought if I have these kind of symptoms, will I still be able to fill out a chatbot? I'm not quite sure. But if you look at the advice, it's not nothing that they're saying there. They're saying you might need urgent medical attention. That's scary. So you better be really, really sure that this is the advice that you want to give and that it's accurate before you actually give it. So while the use case is interesting, there's, you know, the World Health Organization one is a bit more safe in that way. So it's interesting to see what's happening there and also how we could improve this. Because of course we do have possibilities for personalization, and then you get in the realm of the Corona app. And yeah, that's interesting. But again, big success, millions of people using this every day. Yeah.
Okay. So where do they source data for their answers? Is it via the open source databases, so they have their own data sets?
The flow itself is actually based on the questions of the WHO. So again, source content is from World Health Organization. And I do know that I think it might be Stanford or either Mayo who actually validated this particular flow. I don't know what they do at the back end. And also that's basically what I know about it front end wise.
Maaike, there is a question already. What an interesting topic. What is the strategy and process of training a good AI for chatbot? What is the situation now and the challenges for tomorrow? Okay,
I can be, I'll do a really brief description about that. Basically, when you build an NLP, so natural language-based, intent-based chatbot, you provide an initial training set of utterances, like, you know, the actual questions that you think of yourself. And then basically what you do is you train the chatbot once or twice, and then you basically just put it live and then you wait until lots of users start using it. And that's the way you train a chatbot. So especially in the initial phase, lots of companies take some time to do this internally or speed it up. Because if you put it out there in that phase, if you put it out there to the world, you actually might have a chance of not being very accurate initially. And also depending, of course, on the language model and the quality of that, the accuracy rate will vary, but it will not start with 80%. That's something you have to train. So each day, again, go through your data set, see what's asked, and assign it to the right questions in your chatbot.
Maaike, my last question to you, and then we will transfer to another speaker who is fantastic, amazing, brilliant. My question to you is an SNL. So do people ask for how much the ticket is, or what's the most common question?
Oh, well, that's an interesting one. Actually, there's a lot of questions about vergeten in en uit te checken. So I forgot to check in or check out. Also things like I left stuff in the train. But the check in, check out one, that's probably the most asked one. That's the flow we designed first, and that's the most successful one.
And those of you who are from abroad, and s.nl or .nl, it's the the name of the Dutch railroads company. That's the biggest, and I guess the monopoly in the market, so the only one as big as that. And they use chatbot to their full extent. That was built by Maaike sometime back in the day with her help.
If I can finish one final summary, just a few minutes, because there's one use case that I would like to address really shortly, and that's this one, the Netherlands. We don't have a chatbot, so let's dream out loud. Yeah, that's.
If you could say what's Rijksoverheid for the international.
Rijksoverheid, that's the Dutch government, and they are responsible for general communication towards the public.
Thank you.
So imagine they'd have a chatbot. Yeah, let's build one. But we're in Holland. We've got women in AI. We've got women in voice. We've got all this technology. So why don't we develop chatbots as a service so that we can share them? Why don't we let them be owned by governments and information owners and public institutions so that we know that they're reliable and always up to date? And of course, we should make them AI powered. Because, I mean, yeah, it's something if you can click a button, but it's much nicer if you can just ask, hey, when can I get driving lessons again? And you say, hey, great news, you can have contact on May 11th. Or I'm a student, I'm in my final year, can I do an exam? And we now know that that's possible again from June 15th. I miss swimming, please let me swim again. Hey, great news, 11th of May. And of course, the question that everybody asked, I want to be in the sun with a big glass of beer. Well, good news, because, hey, from 1st of June, we can all sit outside again. That's the kind of question that I would like my chatbot to answer.
And that's a very happy end of your input, because indeed, sunny weather outside, glass of drink, water, whatever you prefer drinking, and just opportunity to socialize. Don't forget 1.5 meters apart, still the case. But nevertheless, thank you so much, Maaike. It was great learning from you, and you inspired me to start my own practice, or at least to try building my own chatbot. Yeah, exciting.
Let's go and sit out in the sun and build a bot.
Build a bot. Yes, that's actually a great name for a business. Okay, thank you so much. Let me now pass the digital microphone to our other speaker, Marian Mulder, who's been in the chatbot game for some time. Hi, Marian. How are you doing today?
Good.
Feeling great? You energized? Still in love with chatbots?
Am I in love with chatbot? Yeah, sure. That's.
Well, you should be passionate about what you do.
Yeah, no, it's definitely it's everything I do from 9 in the morning to almost midnight. So it's my life at the moment.
So when did it start for you? Like how many years ago that you got involved into this field?
Yeah, so I've got like 20 years of working experience. Yeah, well, this is actually not blonde, it's gray, so it's showing my age. I have over 20 years of experience in digital, and for me, you know, making digital work for you is the key passion throughout my work. And that started back in the days with intranets and websites and coding in HTML, and then I moved on to apps, and I've also worked in my portal, so customer service portals where you log in, and every time I'm wondering, you know, with the newest technology, what can you do? So about, I think it's 4 or probably almost 5 years ago now, I got wind of this thing that was a virtual assistant, and I had this magical feeling of the same thing I had when I had to say, as I had the first time I learned about the internet. And for the young folks among us, there was a time there wasn't an internet. And so back in the late 90s, I discovered the internet, and I thought, okay, I want to get into this field because this is going to change the world. And this 4 years ago, when these colleagues of mine at ING told me about this thing that was a virtual assistant, and apparently it's been around for years already, but I thought, okay, I had the same feeling, this is going to change the world again. It's a very different interface, and it's going to make life easier. And that's my passion. So I went to every meetup that you could go to, went to meet the right people, and thought I need to be in this business. So, and the good news was, you know, back in 4 years ago, if you could speak the word, you were the expert. So getting into that field was an interesting one, but I've learned a lot since the last 4 years from people like Maaike and all of the others. And the funny thing is, for me, it's very similar to building websites, but then again, it's also very different. So it's really interesting to be in this field right now, especially with you know, the crisis and to see what we can do with it now and how much potential it has for the future.
Mm-hmm. Wow. You've been there for a while, and it's not gray hair, it's actual beauty.
Sure.
I like how you move forward. Right, I have a question for you, then let's jump right to the topic. So you've been building recently chatbots, virtual assistants for the Chamber of Commerce in the Netherlands and for the IMC, the Medical Center from Amsterdam. With this, how do you see the implementation from the government side and public institutions? Because I see a lot of businesses and enterprises in particular, they experiment, they innovate, but knowing how the government side, it takes loops of confirmation, approvals, checking. So on average, how fast it is to implement a chatbot or confirm the implementation of chatbot if it's a government institution?
Well, it's very much the same as what Maaike was saying. You can do some of it in 2 hours, but then it's just a small use case, and you get the basics. But realistically, the chatbot version for the AMC hospital, the first, I think both of the projects that I've been working on is 2 or 3 months from the moment you actually start building something to get a good basics in place. But let me just start with the AMC hospital, give you some background. When I joined AMC 2 years ago, they had a website with a search bar in the middle of it that wasn't really recognized as a chatbot, but actually had chatbot technology behind it already. So you could ask questions and it would give you answers rather than it being an actual search engine. So they've had, when I started there with my project, they had about a year's worth of knowledge of what people were actually asking. And let me share my screen as well to give you the idea of what it looked like. I think you're seeing my, okay, next slide. This is what the AMC hospital website now looks like. So you, like, funnily enough, very thematically, we now have a COVID logo above us, but we have a bunch of conversation starters. So, and it looks much more like a chatbot. And I wanted to click on this now, but it doesn't actually work. It's a screenshot. But this is kind of the chatbot that we built in a number of months' time. And again, the actual building was done very quickly, but it took months of research and user interviews, and months, I didn't do this full time, and there's a duration versus the actual working hours, but the duration was quite a number of months where we were doing interviews with people who were speaking to patients. And we actually did some very, very early paper prototype testing at the polyclinics, and started talking to people and just showed them a screen on a tablet and asked them a few questions and see how they were interacting. Because there were lots of assumptions about people in a hospital. Like, for example, older people don't use it and young people do. That's not true. It was difficult. No, it wasn't. And the most interesting thing I learned was actually people don't think they're using a chatbot. They just have a question and they want the answer quickly. And that's the key thing to it. It's the user experience design. So I think 90% of the time that we spend on what you look at now is user experience design. And the interesting thing with a hospital is that the information people look for on the website, about 80% is logistics. Where do I need to go for what? So I need to get there. I have an appointment. How do I get there? Where do I park? And if I'm in the building, how do I get to a particular area? And the appointment, which is the second button, which is called afspraken, is actually people tend to call a lot, and then they ask, why are you calling the hospital? Well, it's about my appointment. And that's like, why are you want to talk to your appointment? Usually it's because people are late. They want to change their appointment, or they're on the way and they're stuck in traffic or something. So it's really about visiting, and then there's a little bit about medical questions. And the hospital actually decided the chatbot does not answer medical questions. So what it does do is give you quick replies to basic information we have about specific illnesses or treatments, but that's about it. So you can't have medical questions done here. So a key thing with this particular design was also making sure people understand this is a chatbot and they don't start sharing their medical knowledge with the system. So really finding a way to designing an interaction that people know, okay, I just need to click on something, or I just type something and I get an answer, but it's not human. That was really, really important. So, and the key thing, if you ask me, what makes a hospital or the Chamber of Commerce different from a lot of the commercial units is we can't sell more sick, and we can't, and we don't want to hide our phone number, because in the case of a hospital, that's usually the number one use case is let's not have them not call us anymore, but use something else. Is in case of emergency, you kind of want to be able to call. So finding the number, but finding the right number is really important. And the same actually works for the Chamber of Commerce. Again, we're not selling something, we have a public function. Let me go to the COVID or the Corona version. The key thing for the Chamber of Commerce is that we help anyone in the country who wants to run a business needs to be registered. So other businesses know that you are a decent company and you're registered, and therefore, you can be trusted. So the top use cases actually are registering with the Chamber of Commerce, or making a change to your data. So your company name has changed, or your activity code has changed, or as of recently, lots of people have actually discovered that the SBI code is wrong, which was something that we already knew. So that's a very base function of the Chamber of Commerce. But there's two other things. They're also an institution for giving advice, and the Chamber of Commerce wants to become, and already partially or to an extent already is, the go-to place for entrepreneurs for any questions they have about being an entrepreneur. So I've been working with the Chamber of Commerce for about a year now, getting ready for the regular chatbot process. And we already had a little bit of a chatbot platform. But working for governments, anything over 30,000 euros means you need to go through a tender process. And that was like a long, long process to find the right person to be able to deal with. And then came Corona. So I was actually getting prepared for finishing off the tender, starting to think about doing a new chatbot and taking our time for 2 to 3 months and gradually starting to put content in. But then Corona came. So what happened is on the 16th of March, I think that was a Monday, I spoke to my manager and said, how about we put a Corona chatbot up? And he said, how long is it going to take? And in good Marian style, I said, 2 days. It took me 2 weeks. Actually,
Oh, wow.
It was done in 2 days with the content and the basic things, and with the help of Maaike and Anja getting the basic content set up. But then this pop-up window needed to be implemented in the website, and then the security guys went, rightfully so, so what are you trying to do to our website now? Has this gone through the appropriate processes? But it being crisis, it really helped. The entire company said, well, we need to do something. This needs to go up now. So everyone was working day and night to be able to implement the window you see now here. That is a pop-up window showing you a bot that answers your questions. The chatbot that we currently have at the Chamber of Commerce is like really a button bot. So you see 3 buttons here and make a choice. You can't really type anything in it. So that makes it really simple. We also have the option, do you want to speak to an employee? So as to what Maaike was already also saying, and I need to check my time also, is the real learning actually starts to work when people start asking questions. But what we do have is a live chat connected to the chatbot, at least for 2 hours a day. So we start to understand what people's questions are and how our answers are. So that's building up a really good knowledge of where to go. And I think that's going forward is what we continue doing is soon we will have a new version of the chatbot available. And soon is like Marian thinks it's 2 days, but it'll be a few more weeks. That you can ask your question, you can ask anything you want to ask the Chamber of Commerce. If the bot knows it, it will give an answer. If it doesn't, we'll forward you to the live chat. So the key to that is actually, like Maaike said also earlier, and let me show you my last slide, is we tend to think it's about technology. Really, it isn't. Yeah, you need to get some basic technology implemented. Then we think it's about content. Yeah, of course it is, you need content, but really it's about the UX and the organization, and the UX being the design of your flows and understanding what your key questions are that your user has, and the organizational backdrop for this, like for these organizations, because we want to be reliable and trusted. It's going to take quite a number of things as a big transition process to get the organization to go on full live chat and go into really focusing on being a question-based organization. And that's exactly the ambition that the board of directors have. They have given us a virtue of a fake hypothetical stretch target of saying, we'd like you to be able to answer about 50 million questions in 2024. Whether that's going to be the actual case, but that's how where the ambitions are, as in we really, really want to be able to answer any question that an entrepreneur has. So that's going to take some organizational challenges. And of course, it's going to take a lot of good content and good copywriting.
Thank you, first of all, Marian, for sharing the knowledge. And yeah, I'll get back to you with other questions. As you can notice, I changed. Yeah, I'm wearing something red now. Red is the color of one great company who supports our webinar today, which is Oracle for Startups. But the same, it's a sweater to support Francesco, who I would like to call on stage. Ciao, Bella. It's Bella, but
That's great. That's fantastic. Thanks.
Well, I'm always trying my best to address the right way. So Francesco, it's such a pleasure finally talking to you like this. How are you doing?
Good. Here in Copenhagen, it's sunny days. It's such a shame. I mean, we've been at home for the last 2 months, and for 2 months has been sunny. I don't think I've ever seen the sun for 2 months in a row in Copenhagen. So a bit of a pity, but
I love the city, but especially in the sun. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
But behind you, it's not Copenhagen, is it?
Pardon?
It is. Behind you, what's the visuals behind?
So this is my hometown back in Italy. This is called Bologna.
You're from Bologna. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So as I understood, with business, you're across the globe. When was the last time you went to Bologna? Before COVID, of course.
End of January.
End of January.
Borderline.
How's digital transformation nowadays in Bologna?
Maybe Milan would be the best example, being the financial and the commercial capital of the country, and we see that there is a lot going on, especially from a bank and insurance perspective. So maybe less advanced, less innovation going on compared to Scandinavia or maybe the Netherlands. But I think that, you know, they're picking up pretty quick. Hopefully.
Okay. Right. So then let me address your story, because you are the founder and head of partners of Bot Supply, which is your own business that is growing fast. Could you please share with me a bit in short your story, but more about Bot Supply? What are you focusing on, and how is it for business today?
Yeah. So we started here in Copenhagen back in 2016. I think we've actually been definitely one of the first companies in Scandinavia to get started with chatbots, and I would believe also the first one in Denmark itself. That was back in end of September 2016. We actually started our journey into chatbots beginning of 2016 when you know, all the three founders of Bot Supply, we were working in another company. And for internal purposes, we started playing around with Slack-based chatbots. And so we immediately saw the potential for increase the productivity and efficiency that solutions like this can bring. And then we said, and then it was also the moment that the whole hype around chatbots was growing dramatically. Facebook just launched chatbots on Facebook Messenger, and other platforms were also catching up. And so in September we started working on Bot Supply. We didn't really have any idea, you know, where to get started, how to build a chatbot from a technical perspective, from a design perspective. But so anyway, you know, that's how journeys become. You find out and learn things along the way. And you know, lucky enough, by December we were able to find the first enterprise customer, and from there we started building our own internal AI team, our internal conversational design team, and then, you know, one thing after the other, and the company grows, customers, partners. I will also mention something about our collaboration with Oracle in the next while showing the slides.
Okay, well, collaboration with Oracle, I'm very curious about. I've been, of course, studying the stack, the proposition, the value for the startups, and you're one of the startups from Oracle. I guess that's then the moment to present the slides and speak about the value of being a startup in COVID times. So let's say not the value, but the opportunity that the momentum creates. But at the same time, you've been growing across the globe. So I'm curious to know, how do you ensure the growth, and what are the use cases?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that everyone, all the speakers before me have shared quite clearly how we live in unprecedented times, and I don't really have to repeat these once again. By working with enterprises, what we see is that from both a customer, an external perspective, so with customers and prospects, but also from an internal perspective with employees, there is a huge growing demand in terms of incoming requests, be them phone calls, be them via email, via chat, and what we see is that enterprises are made of humans, people, right? And when these people are actually back home with the family, kids, relatives, of course, their productivity goes down, and companies are not really able to face these growing support volumes from different channels. And so what we said, we thought, okay, what can we do? We have a platform, we have a technology, we have knowledge. How do we make it available for people, companies, non-profit organizations, hospitals, available to actually face these increasing demand? And so, just to give you a little bit of an introduction on what we do as a company, we have built what we call the chatbot management system, which is an easy to use, no code kind of platform that lives on top the Oracle Digital Assistant, which is the chatbot framework from Oracle. And that's also why back in 2018, we joined the Oracle for Startups program. We also make it available in 27 languages, and these two things combined, so an easiness to use and support for native 27 languages, and the fact that we can leverage the Oracle network on a global scale, meant that we could you know, take this platform and make it available for listed companies or small and medium businesses, ministries, NGOs, hospitals, really from all corners of the world. Oracle really helped us in getting in touch with, you know, companies in Peru, as well as in Cambodia, in Togo, as well as in the UK, Sweden to Brazil. So being part of this network really helps us being available in all continents, and also across languages, right? On top of the platform, though, since we're talking very much about we're talking a lot about conversational design. You know, building a chatbot, as we mentioned several times during this webinar, is not just about the technology itself. At the end of the day, we are talking about channels and interfaces that didn't exist until 2 years ago. Many people have never interacted with a Google Assistant or with a chatbot until today. And so together with the technology, we also focus a lot on the design process that lies behind building a successful chatbot. So over the last 3 years, we've been working on 60 to 70 different enterprise projects, always going through this methodology that we have developed internally. And now what we are doing is that we are taking this knowledge, this experience, and we are trying to pass it over to Oracle partners around the world, so that we can go to market and spread good practices on building successful chatbots on a global scale. If you have any question in the meantime, yeah, just interrupt me.
Yeah, I'm just studying that slide with the timeline and milestones and how you do the design process. Wow, this is great. Can you share the slides after? Is that shareable, or it's just for the webinar?
This is an extremely simplified version, so there is no secret in this.
I think it's still very useful for those who are in the game or considering starting businesses of their own. For example, we have participants from Way Accelerate program, that those women entrepreneurs, and I know quite a few of them are building chatbots or conversation design, or trying to figure out how to make that difference to the world with a great social impact. So thank you for sharing, ladies and gentlemen. Sure. You will receive the slides later on. Francesco, so question to you. As an advice to the entrepreneurs who are starting, especially in the field of digital fields, whether it's health tech or fintech or whatever, and the application, or let's say the change that was provoked by COVID, what are the key 3 things you would advise the entrepreneurs to focus on? Some say pivoting, some say close the doors and go to the corporate careers. But what would be your advice for those who are really starting the business and they're fighting for making it successful despite the harshness of times?
Are we talking about business in the chatbot space or?
Yes, business. Well, business in general, from your perspective, starting whether it's chatbot or it's AI-centered platform. But it's all digital, and most of them enabled by chatbots.
So if I look at what I see in our small world over the last 40 to 50 days, is that we've been able to start almost 100 conversations with again, enterprises, ministries, hospitals around the world, because I think that more than ever, these institutions see the value of automation. They don't look at automation as a nice to have anymore. especially because this crisis, this virus is bringing still a lot of uncertainty with it. Right, we don't really know if it's going to come back in 3 months, if it's going to last for the next 1 year and a half. We don't really know, right? So what we see is that there is actually an acceleration for enterprises, especially to invest in tools like this. I must say that I have seen hundreds of different COVID chatbots, and I don't really see the value in building the 101 number 101 chatbot, telling you whether you have symptoms or not. I think that whenever you are building a COVID chatbot, it also really needs to be based on what the business is about, right? Nobody's gonna go to the bank website asking if they have COVID. Hopefully, at least I wouldn't do it. I don't know about you. So very much about automating those processes where enterprises are struggling due to boom in volume of support. But also the way they work internally, right? Because Marcel mentioned that one of the shifts in the tech world is working from home, correct? And so also internal productivity, internal chatbots are going to be more and more used. Some of the implementations that we have done over the last 40 days, actually the majority of the implementations that we've done over the last 40 days are internal chatbots. Be them on an HR system, be them on the internal WhatsApp chat, be them on Microsoft Teams, Slack. That's an area that is extremely interesting to us, especially because we see that a lot of enterprises, they don't really know what a chatbot is. They don't know how it works. They've never built one before. So they would rather test it internally, get some learning, and then scale it to external use cases. So yeah, I don't know if I'm wise enough to give any advice to anyone, but these are some of our learnings.
Well, I would say you probably have an advantage being backed up by Oracle. That makes it easier than your standalone fighter in the field of challenges due to COVID and trying to prove your solution being awesome and fantastic. And this is great because what I see on the slide, obviously it led your business to exponential growth and you are benefiting whether it's internal chatbots or external use for the customer service and so on. And I'm very happy to hear that you keep on growing as business. And I would like to wish you, as the founder of Bot Supply, double that growth, triple that growth, maybe go to a different even universe after you take over the whole planet. But at the same time, I think all the speakers on the call are in the same field. So if you have also questions to each other, don't hesitate to ask, because maybe it's a beginning of something new where all of you are addressing the same topic and can work together. Thank you so much, Francesco. Well, I can use the same statement. It's high and by both, right? But you're still staying here because we are to address the questions and answers. We've received so many fantastic questions. What would be the best way to start small, static, or implement AI straight away without any data? So when you're building chatbot, start small, static, or implement AI full on speeds, just go crazy about it.
Maaike, you want to take this one?
Sure. It definitely depends on the use case, but imagine you would want to end up with an AI chatbot, then go for AI technology, but content-wise, make sure that you have something to offer from day one. So what I usually do, and what we're doing at the Chamber of Commerce now, is we actually build some static flows so that when you enter the chatbot, at least you see something that might be helpful from the beginning. So like a top 10 question. Mm-hmm. And in the background, you just start adding your questions and your flows and training your model and, testing it with pilot groups so that each day and each week, your chatbot grows more intelligent and has more answers to more questions. So it's not or, you can actually do both.
Okay, lovely. Anyone else to add? Otherwise, I'll jump to the next question, which is relevant to what you said. Marian? No?
No, well, there's one thing I want to just make sure is sometimes people say, oh, then we'll just train your bot on, on your data set. And I think we have to be very clear that most companies do not have a data set available that is that can actually be used for training a bot. So you need to find, either you need to be in a position that you have that from another source, from IVR calls or for other log files. But usually you need to be mindful that you won't have a data set and just click the train button and voila. You need to build that first.
Not yet.
Mhm.
And also there's one interesting thing is that chatbots initially are best at answering relatively easy questions with a clear answer. And your data sets will typically be very specific. It will be, for instance, at Dutch Railways, we'd have people saying, yeah, I was traveling from Hilversum North to Diemen Zuid on this and that day, and this and that happened, and then a cat crossed the tracks. Well, it's a bit hard to find the actual question in that. And in order for a chatbot to be able to answer it, especially in the beginning, you should go for more like generic kind of easy to answer questions.
I actually remembered somebody asked me some time ago, quoting, I'm building a business and my platform will have a chatbot. So the way I see it, that my chatbot is integrated with other chatbots, whether it's Convocat or IMSA or any other chatbot. And by talking to each other, chatting to each other, the chatbot source answers from that database and provides answer to my user. Is that possible? And if so, how do you ensure that? If not, okay, why not?
Anything. Well, sure, it's possible, but whether that's going to be easy. You know what Maaike said earlier about the Rijksoverheid needs to join forces. It's about finding the source and being able to provide that as an open source somewhere, for example, through APIs. If that's the case, and the bots can start talking to each other, to the sources, then you have a chance. But at the moment, the technology isn't as far yet. I mean, I also have this dream that I have a personal chatbot who's actually my personal assistant who takes care of me and deals with all these different bots and requests. But at the moment, that isn't really, that's a bit, somewhere in the future, maybe. At the moment, you have to really think, remember back in like 2000, what the first website looked like with the HTML coding that was done in Notepad? We're at that stage, we're not at the stage where we are with websites nowadays. So unless someone has a different opinion, but
well, as soon as the momentum comes, please ring me up. Just tell me it's possible to integrate them all.
But Eve, I don't know if we can elaborate on this a bit more. I'd actually be really interested in Francesco because he's working on internal chatbots, and chances are that if you're in one ecosystem, one company, and one technical environment, that there might actually be a bit of reuse or content architecture that might make it possible to do this.
So the way we do it, and this is one of the cool things by working within the ecosystem of a company that provides, SaaS applications across different use cases like ERP, HCM, finance, supply chain. The fact that you can actually have all these systems communicating with each other. And so you can create some sort of a mother data set to some extent that understands what kind of request and what kind of question that the user is looking for. And then based on the intent detection, then goes down to the different bot, the different skills that you are creating, right? So there is the opportunity to connect different knowledge databases across different departments. And also across different systems and different softwares that a company is using. So I do understand that to some extent we are still at day one of this technology, but I also think that there is so much that can already be done. So more than day one, I would like to think that we are already in day 3, day 5, or day 7. But I understand, especially from a voice perspective, there is still a long way to go before we can use virtual assistants the way we're talking to a human But from a chat-based perspective, I don't think that we are, that behind.
Platform interoperability, that would be a nice one.
Yeah. Maybe to add to it though, what I do know from the AMC hospitals, what we're doing is for the internal version, you will have the same question that will give a very different answer depending on the section you're from. So one of the questions, for example, in hospital is about pregnancy. So if you, even as an employee yourself, if you are pregnant and you ask a question about, I want to answer about pregnancy. If it's from HR, the answer should be very different than when it's from treating a pregnant person as a doctor. So if someone types in a certain word, we're giving context to the question depending on where they ask the question, or either we'll ask a follow-up question. Do you mean is a patient pregnant, or is this about you and your pregnancy and how many days when you can get your time off? So we are doing the triage. We're starting that as well by adding context to it and being aware that certain questions will have a very different answer depending on where you are. And the same is with discharge. So being discharged is or the Dutch word for discharge is ontslag. So ontslag of a employee is very different than an HR person than ontslag of a patient, which is actually very fun and nice. That basically means you're discharged from the hospital. So that's a very positive thing, but it's a very, very different flow, but it's the same word in Dutch. So being able to understand the terminology in combination with the context in which it's asked is something that is we're starting to scratch the surface on that one. And I think that's where AI and NLP and all the smart technology and language knowledge is going to be very helpful to start taking it from there.
And if I can add to what you're saying, Marion, I don't know if it's only our own way of calling it. We call it contextual datasets, which is basically a dataset within the dataset, right? To give contextuality, because as you say, you can ask one question or you can give an answer, right? As a chatbot user that can activate different intents based on where in the conversation you are. So that is crucial, absolutely.
Yeah. And that leads me to another question that was asked here in the Q&A feed, related to personalization. Any experience about a chatbot initiating the conversation by itself based on the context? Context means whether it's a movie theater and you are on Pate, I don't know, checking something, or some other case scenario, you're buying something, you're on online marketplace. Different platforms, different opportunities, but then out of a sudden, it's not you who say, hey, I have a question, but the chatbot says, hi, how are you doing, pretty? You're wearing nice clothes, and how can I help? Is it already taken place, the chatbot becomes the first?
Yeah, it basically, it's very, again, that is early stage, but there are use cases already available, and that's about, something needs to trigger an event. So it means either you are on a specific page for a certain term of time and you're not doing anything. For example, the chatbot might pop up and with a specific question. Depending on the page that you are on, we'll ask you a different question. It could also mean that you program that into a flow. So it's basically if this, then that. So you need to build the business rules in somehow to trigger certain events. And that can be very scripted, or that can actually be much more high tech. I'm sure the others on the call are now really very wanting to jump in on this one, but there are things happening already. We're doing that too.
Well, the second question within this, if it's linked with the CRM, so you know everything about the person and the chatbot appears in the right path of the user journey, isn't it creepy that the chatbot knows me so well that I'm like, wow, you're following me? Or is it okay? Is it normal now?
If I can elaborate on that a bit, Eve, the creepy part of the chatbot is the thing we try to avoid at all costs as chatbot designers. It's actually known as the Uncanny Valley, and it's the same space where you also find the robots, clowns. I don't know if you know this image of this artist. He actually put dolls in metro stations in the UK, like real life-size dolls, and it scares the heck out of me. If you design a chatbot that's actually too human, you end up in the same zone, and people just tend to, freak out, and they just leave your chatbot and it won't return. So one of the principles of good chatbot design is to always make yourself known as a chatbot, always ask for permission, and take it really step by step by step. So usually when you are chatting with a chatbot, you first have to log in. So you explicitly consent to sharing your information. So hopefully chatbots will never just start talking to you out of the blue with all your personal details.
Yeah, hopefully.
And actually, to add to that one, about 3 years ago, I was working for ING, and we were looking at all the different chatbots and the technology and the possibilities. And we then also knew back then, from a technology standpoint, some things were actually already possible. We could have done that, but it was a conscious choice to not do it right now, because exactly that Uncanny Valley is. We already have the data of a lot of the bank already has a lot of data of their customers, and they could technically connect the systems up to and actually start to be a proactive advisor on the website, but people aren't used to it yet. So it's a combination of are you technically is your technology available, but also is your user ready for it, and is your organization ready for it to have that conversation. Now, with everyone getting through COVID onto technology so fast, I think it's going to speed things up. And also with video conferencing and starting to talk to technology, specifically in the voice area, in the elderly care, where use of Google Home type technology is actually way more advanced than we think now. So these things do start to proactively pop up, for example, for people who are they forget things. I always forget
Alzheimer's disease.
With Alzheimer, is that at certain times it will actually start to ping you messages, as in you need to take your medication, or things like that. But again, it's designed in such a manner that it's not intrusive and uncanny, but it's helpful and it's appreciated. And these senior citizens start talking to the technology because they have nothing else to talk to, and they're actually quite happy with it. But it's all about the UX of it and the design, and making sure it's not uncanny and it's helping and not scaring people away.
Thank you, Marian. Well, it's the last minute, but I would like to address the question. Leslie, we see your question about cybersecurity and chatbots. We don't have much time to address it yet, but I'll let you know that on May 22nd, we are organizing a next webinar that it's called Data Behavior and Cybersecurity, powered by IBM. So this is a wonderful momentum to start the discussion with this question and to address the points of cybersecurity. Because in yes or no, if I may ask you all, is it easy to hack chatbots, or is there great prevention from hacking? In yes or no, is it easy to hack or not?
Easier than people.
Marcel said easier than people.
Yeah,
I agree.
that definitely.
Yeah,
it's a system, so it depends on how well you set up your system.
Yeah.
okay, so we'll speak about
comparable to any other kind of app or thing you deploy.
Well, nowadays everything is hackable. It's just the data behavior that makes it vulnerable. So it's 3:30. I would like to say thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today. It's been a fascinating experience. Now I really need to start building my own chatbot and try whether it's hackable or not, whether it's user-friendly or not, and whether it can connect to all the other chatbots in the world. It's my ambition, my personal goal. Thank you so much, Marion, Marcel, Maaike, Francesco, and Oracle for Startups, and every participant on this call. You made it possible. We hope you learned a lot. And if you have more questions, please send it to eve@womenai.co. If you are a CTO or developer who wants to work in the startup field, let me know. Again, matching. And if you want to join Women in AI team, again, reach out. Thank you. Enjoy the day. Take advantage of this sunny.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.